Your 20s are like a giant experiment where you're both the scientist and the test tube. You're probably going to make some spectacularly bad decisions, and some amazing ones too. Today I'm breaking down the choices that I made, the ones that worked, the ones that didn't, and what I learned along the way, and what each of these actually taught me. Because chances are you're making some version of these decisions right now, and hopefully you can learn from my mistakes. Let's start with a positive one. How many of you have a story that you tell yourself about who you are? I'm not a morning person, I'm not sporty, or I'm not creative? I was absolutely not a sporty kid. I dreaded PE lessons and avoided sports day like it was the plague. I was the smart musical kid, and I held on to that identity for so many years. Then, at 20, I tried an exercise class at uni. A mixture of weights and cardio, and I actually enjoyed it. I started going 3 to 4 times a week, and I genuinely looked forward to the sessions. I went from I'm not sporty to I'm strong, fit, and healthy, and that identity shift made exercising so much easier. It just became part of who I was. Now, my relationship with the gym hasn't been perfect. It's definitely been stop-start over the years as my routines have changed. But it is something that I've always come back to because it's become a part of who I am. Who we are is changeable. Pick one and not a person belief that you have. Now try the thing once or twice with zero expectation. You might still not be that person, or you might discover something new and that you've actually been wrong about yourself for years. Now, despite getting into fitness and the gym, I was still drinking a lot on the weekends and the odd weeknight. I hated quiet weekends in London. Everyone's schedules were so busy that plans needed to be made a full month in advance, and planning ahead wasn't really my strong suit. So Friday would arrive, I'd have nothing planned, and I'd frantically message people looking for something to do. Most last minute plans involved drinking. Then I'd spend Saturday hungover and Sunday recovering or running errands. I'd feel like I'd wasted my weekend, and then work would begin on Monday, I'd get busy, and I'd repeat the pattern all over again. I made these choices not necessarily because I wanted to, but because I didn't have any better alternatives. Psychologists call this the default path, and it took me a long time to realize the negative routine that I'd fallen into. To stop yourself from doing this, ask yourself, what's your default path that you fall into when you're bored or lonely? Scrolling social media, ordering takeout, drinking, or saying yes to plans that you don't really want to do. The fix isn't willpower, it's designing better defaults. Now I plan one thing that I'd be genuinely excited about each weekend, even if it's just trying a new cafe or going for a walk somewhere new. Having one anchor point for me prevents the panic of having an empty weekend and resorting to those default options. But when you're busy and tired, it can be difficult to make these decisions. Post-uni, I was going through a rough time and constantly comparing my life to others online. After doom scrolling for an hour one evening, I got frustrated and just deleted my social media apps. A couple of days went by and I'd started to feel noticeably better. I still thought about what others were doing and fell into the trap of reaching back out for my phone. But the apps were gone and I didn't have a way to check or compare. Although I did get tempted and I re-downloaded the apps a couple of times, having to log back in and remember my details added just enough friction for me to think, wait, do I actually want to do this? After about 6 months, the distance from social media has started to heal my relationship with it. I did re-download some of the apps, but I had a completely different approach with it. I've recently unfollowed any accounts that made me feel bad or compare my life to others. And I set app timers which dramatically reduced the amount of time I spent scrolling. So try this. What's one app or habit that makes you feel worse, not better? You don't have to delete it forever, but just try removing it for 1 week and see how you feel. Although deleting Instagram has massively helped, it's taken me much longer to get over the comparison and the negative self-talk. I'm still not convinced I'm 100% there. I spent most of my 20s with a brutal inner critic. Nothing was ever good enough. As a high achiever, I was so focused on the next goal that I never stopped to celebrate what I had actually accomplished. It was never good enough, and I was always striving for the next thing and beating myself up for not already being there. Researchers call this the hedonic treadmill. We think achieving the next goal will make us happy, but when we get there, we just set a new goal and fall back into the same dissatisfaction. No matter what we achieve, it will never be enough, and that's because this doesn't come from our accomplishments, but it comes from within ourselves. To begin to fix this, I started small. When I achieved something, even something tiny, I'd congratulate myself and say well done. It felt a bit odd, but gradually I started to feel pride. I started hearing my positive inner voice speak up a little bit more often, and even though the negative one was still there, when was the last time you actually congratulated yourself on something? Now, I'm not gonna lie and say I've completely fixed this, but I still push myself too hard, but I'm working on it. To some extent, I think this never good enough mindset led me to burnout from my dream job in London. I stayed feeling burnt out in this job for over a year. And the worst part, I completely lost sense of who I was and what my priorities were. I was so burnt out that I didn't have the capacity to do anything more than just get through the day. And there were a series of mistakes that led me to that point, believing that hard work would lead to recognition. I worked myself harder and harder, waiting to be noticed, whilst everyone else advocated for themselves and got progressed above me. Because I was keen to do well, every time someone asked me to take on extra work, I would say yes. My to-do list became this mounting tower of tasks. I was doing too much, nothing particularly well, and getting overwhelmed just trying to keep my head above the water. The difficulty with burnout is it accumulates slowly and can go unnoticed for a long time. By the time I realized how bad things had gotten, I was completely exhausted, having medical issues, and it felt too overwhelming to get a new job and leave. The signs of burnout are often quite subtle. The slow accumulation of stress, the mountain tower of tasks. You struggle to do things that once were easy, and your energy is completely drained. If you're watching this and thinking, this sounds familiar, then don't wait too long. Ask yourself, if I continue doing exactly what I'm doing now for another year, would I feel happy and would I have more energy or less? Eventually, I learned from my prior mistake and made one of my best decisions. 3 years later, I found myself in an incredibly toxic work environment. A problematic CEO, a reactive team, everything feeling urgent, and a really negative culture. But this time, I'd learned to recognize the signs early and made an exit plan, gave myself a deadline for when I needed to resign, and I stuck to it. Quitting allowed me to take a 5-week trip back to the UK for some really close friends' weddings, and also was the perfect opportunity for me to give self-employment a try. In some ways, I'm glad the company culture was so bad, because when things are okay or only slightly uncomfortable, it's harder to get the motivation to actually make the change. But in this case, in my mind, the decision was crystal clear. Is there a situation in your life where you're tolerating slightly uncomfortable and you should actually be planning an exit? I used to think that making slow, well-thought-out decisions was best. But now I started to make faster, more spontaneous choices before I get the chance to talk myself out of them. Some of my best decisions came from saying yes without too much consideration. When my friends were traveling Southeast Asia, a friend and I spontaneously decided to fly out to Thailand to meet them. No elaborate planning, just, should we do this? Next thing we knew, we were flying out for an incredible time. That trip became one of my favourite memories from my 20s. This same mindset also contributed to me moving out here to Australia. Despite it being a big decision, I really didn't overthink it too much. Instead, I just went with my gut and said yes to trying something new. And a year into living in Australia, I flew back to the UK to surprise my mum for her 60th birthday. I knew how much it would mean to her, and it was one of the best things I did and easiest decisions that I made. How many times have you talked yourself out of doing something because it wasn't practical? Or it was too expensive, or it didn't make sense on paper, or you just didn't feel ready? We're so good at building logical arguments for staying exactly where we are, but the decisions that change your life rarely look sensible at first. When we try to plan everything perfectly, we tend to over-rely on our brain, but sometimes your gut knows something before your brain does, or your heart feels something that you just can't put into words. Here's what all of these decisions, the good and the bad, taught me. The 20s aren't about making perfect, optimized decisions. They're about experimenting, trying new things, getting it wrong, and realizing what truly matters to you. The moments that shaped me most weren't the safe ones, they were the bold ones. So I've started taking a new approach. Every year I choose one scary thing to do, and it has completely changed the trajectory of my life. If you want to know what these scary things were and how you can do this in your own life, then watch this video next. Because sometimes you don't need a perfect plan, you just need one brave decision.